Hi guys, I am back with another Nerd Rants video, and guess what? I found another show that I absolutely love that got canceled! Yay! Why does this always happen to me? I find a show that I absolutely love and it ends up getting canceled. I mean, Teen Titans, it got canceled. Young Justice, it got canceled for a while. Clone Wars, I don't know if that one was technically canceled or if they just ended it and then they decided to add that 7th season, but I'm pretty sure it was canceled. Gargoyles, it was canceled. I find, all the best shows get canceled, and I always seem to find those shows and fall in love with them. So the latest show in my ever-growing list of canceled shows that I love is called the Shannara Chronicles. Before anyone of the fandom asks, I have not read the books, but I am now very intrigued and am curious and would really like to read this series. So yeah, that might be coming up sometime in the near future that I will at some point read those books. But for now, we will talk about the 2 seasons of the show that we got. They were great. I really liked this show. And Manu Bennett is he did so good as Alanon. And it kind of gave me a bit of like basically whiplash, like fandom whiplash, because he's the same actor who plays Slade Wilson in The Arrow. So the first scene he shows up, I'm just like, wait, is that him? Is that him? And then the first shot we get of his like actual face, I think the moment of just like, oh my gosh, it's him, was when he was walking down the hallway in his full druid outfit. I was just like, oh my gosh, it's Slade! Slade is playing a magic man! Oh man, I was so excited. I was so excited. I love Manu Bennett. He's great. It's funny because these are the only 2 things I've seen him in, and I absolutely love both of them. So, he did so great as Alanon. I loved Alanon. I will proudly say that my favorite characters in this show, none of them were actually the main characters. If I had to pick a favorite from the main characters, it would probably be Will. But just overall, my favorite characters were none of those 3, or any of the ones in the 2nd season either. Eritrea, Amberly, Lyria, Marith, I didn't care about any of them, really. They were not my favorites. They were all good characters, but they weren't my favorite characters. I loved Alanon. Bandon was great. Oh, I can't remember what his actor's name is. I think the first name is Marcus, but I don't know the last name. But he was awesome. And just, him as a villain was amazing. He was so dark and evil. It was so good. Oh, I appreciated the amount of gore in this show, which sounds bad, but like immediately after this, I finished this one, I started watching a different fantasy show that was by the CW or whatever, the same people who did The Flash and The Arrow and those shows. And they're fighting with swords and they are cutting each other and there is no blood. Nothing, no signs that they are actually hurting each other. So I really, really appreciated the fact that they showed blood, that they went for it and ripped a guy's head off. It was so good. And they just accurate portrayal of blood and the gore, and it's not shying away from the fact that this is violent. I loved it. bad. But yeah, I love Bandon. Probably even more so as a villain than he was in the first season. I loved him as a villain. And then I also love Slanter. Slanter the gnome is awesome. And it was just, second season, they get captured or whatever, and they're, on threat of execution. They're, going to get killed. And I'm sitting there the entire time just going, Slanter is not allowed to die. He's not allowed to die. You can't kill Slanter. I love him. But it's just, I like the weirder characters, this random side characters. And just in general, I love the gnomes in general. They're great. I love them. And I will say, the makeup, the prosthetics, to make the different, the gnomes and the trolls, I loved it. It was really good. This was a good quality show. They had a good budget, obviously. The makeup and prosthetics and all that were good quality. What little CGI they had to use was really good, was good quality CGI. And they had good actors. They really did. I may not have been the biggest fan of all the characters, but that's because of the character, not the actor. The actors portrayed their characters really well. And it was just overall a really good series, and it was good quality, and I don't know why it was canceled. Explain this to me. Did it just not get enough people watching it? Because it's great. It's so good. Oh, man. Yeah. So, acting was great. Overall, just quality of the show was really good. And the story and the world were really cool. It took me a minute to figure out kind of how this world worked, but it's actually really cool because it's technically post-apocalyptic, but it's also got the fantasy feel to it because it's humanity and our present day world gets attacked by demons and collapses, and then the demons get trapped by magic, and the world gets rebuilt into now this fantasy world with the elves and the gnomes and the trolls, and we never see dwarves, but it says dwarf in the title intro sequence thing, and so we don't see dwarves, but it turns into a fantasy world, and I love it. And it's really cool because they have very familiar objects, there's cars or the Golden Gate Bridge, and you just see all of these things from our world, our present time, and they're just dilapidated and in ruins. And there's a scene in the first episode, the first scene of it, where you see this Space Needle tipped on its side, covered in vines, and it's such a cool world, and it's such a different take on a fantasy because it's not happening in medieval times, and this is all in what you would assume to be ancient times and centuries in the past. No, this is centuries in the future, and the world collapsed, and we turned back into this monarchy, almost medieval feeling world. We basically digress backwards because of this demon war. And I loved it. I love this world. It was so cool. And it was so cool. And then the storyline in the first season, we had them trying to stop the demons from escaping because the magical tree is dying. And that was really cool. And it was honestly, it felt like much more of a fantasy plot line as compared to the second season. The first season was more like, this is kind of your stereotypical, this is a fantasy series. They're trying to save the magic to stop the dark, evil people from coming. And so it's kind of follows the storyline of your stereotypical fantasy, where the light's trying to beat darkness, and it's a really cool way of doing it. And I love the concept of the Elcrease as a prison, and the leaves falling in each leaf represents a demon, and when they fall, the demon is released. And it's a really cool way of doing this, fairly, stereotypical fantasy storyline. But the second season gets into a more interesting, plot line to me. It's I feel like it's a little less, action-packed than the first season. It's a little more of a political storyline, because they're fighting people who are against magic, and the main villain, I guess, doesn't show up until the last few episodes, as opposed to in the first one, the Dagdamor the main villain, called the Dagdamor, shows up. He's the first demon to be released, and he shows up and he's kind of doing attacks the entire time, whereas this one goes the other route, so where the followers come first, and then we build up to the main villain. And so that makes it a little less of all of the, I guess it's a little bit slower. It doesn't feel slower, but looking at it just pacing wise, the second season, based on how the plot works and all that, it is a little bit of a slower moving plot line, which isn't bad. They do it really well, and it's a really cool story with the Warlock Lord, which is just, obviously the bad guy, but just really skilled, dark druid, the magic people, if you don't know what a druid is. Basically the wizards of this world. But yeah, basically just a really dark druid, and building up to him coming back and how they're resurrecting him from the dead, and Abandon being his loyal follower to try and get power. And so the plot line with following Evil Bandon is great, because I love Evil Bandon. And the Crimson being anti-magic and basically going on a witch hunt for all of the magic users in the Four Realms, the Four Lands. Oh, I love it. It's such a cool storyline, and it's, like I said, it's more political, so it's a little bit slower moving, but it's still so cool. And of course, one of my other favorite characters, Ander. Oh, I love Ander. I guess I should say loved. God, seriously, guys, so many people die in this series. Are you kidding me? The flippin' entire royal family? All of them? And that's not even, that's like 5 people, not counting everyone that we see die in the series, the people that are implied to die we hear from backstories. There's so much death in this series. Some of these characters died, and I didn't get the chance to even get attached to them, because they just here they are, and here they died, because so many people died. Lauren dies in was it first or second? In the first or second episode. And it's just wow, That's horrible. I want to be sad about this, but I had no chance to get connected to this character or get invested in this character, so it's not sad. I mean, it's a gruesome death, but it's not sad. Ander's death actually made me sad, though, because I love Ander, and he's such a good character. I'm sorry, that's such a spoiler. I've been doing pretty good on spoilers so far, but those are spoilers. So I hope that doesn't ruin watching the show for you. I mean, the death isn't the hardest hitting part of this series. There are other things that hit way harder. So hopefully I don't ruin the experience by telling you that Ander dies. Anyway, it's great. It's such a good series. And I cannot express enough that Men Who Bennett is awesome. I love Alanon so much. I also love Slade Wilson so much. He plays Man Who Bennett plays some of my favorite characters. Oh, it's so good. Anyway, let's try and reel myself back in here a minute. Whew, okay. What do I need to talk about yet? The magic system. We will talk about the elf stones and the Shannara and the druids and maybe a little bit about the bad guys. So, the druids are awesome. It's like this whole order. And then we have Alanon, who is the last one. And I really love the design as a physical representation of their magic. The druids have runes carved into their skin. It's really cool. Alanon's got them along his, like around the head and on his neck. It's so cool. And then, I'm not going to spoil stuff, but just for those of you who've seen the show, or I assume read the books, you kind of know what happens in the second season with his runes, and that's a really cool concept too. And then Bandon, gets him on his back later when he goes evil. I'm sorry, that's probably the spoiler too, but I'm sorry. I'm half avoiding spoilers in this one. Half avoiding spoilers. And then Marith later gets one on the base of her neck. And it's such a cool concept of having this like physical representation of their magic. So that was actually really cool to me. And the druids just having being able to use magic just with hands and whatever. And then with the Shannara, they require the elf stones or like the Sword of Shannara in order to use their magic. And there's magic in their blood, but in order to use it, they have to have these artifacts or these objects that are magical. So they can use magical objects, but they can't just like use magic. And just the difference between them, really cool. And I love the druids so flippin' much. I'm sorry. It's mostly because of Alanon, since he's kind of the only druid you meet. Anyway, yeah, it's really cool because then on top of that, with the magic and the way this world works, there's also all of the science and technology and stuff from our world. As dilapidated as it is, it's still like salvageable for the humans in this world that figure out how to use it. So we have characters that are mixing magic and technology, and it's so cool because that's something you don't get normally in a fantasy film or show, is this mix of technology and magic, because a lot of fantasy happens basically in essentially medieval times, and this one happens in a post-apocalyptic version of our world. So that's really cool to see. It is really cool to see. And oh man, the bad guys, have cool magic too, because obviously everyone's gotta have cool magic, and you have to give bad guys cool magic in order to make them cool villains so that people actually like the villains. The villains were really cool in this, especially with the warlock lord being resurrected using the blood of Alanon, the druid. So then when he comes back, he looks like this weird, dark, distorted version of Alanon, which is really cool. And the Dagdamore has a cool look and like gets in your head, and so he has a lot more of the I manipulate people from the inside, I get into your brain, I toy with your mind. And the Warlock Lord is a lot more of the physical torture and injury, and I just am so powerful with my magic, I can beat you to a pulp. And the Dagdamore kind of destroys you from the inside out. It's so cool. Yes, and then the fact that the druid can read minds. That's just a thing he can do. There's like the Shannara and other magic users, they can't read minds, but the druid can, and it's just, yeah, just all these little details and these powers and this. I love this show. And I'm so sad that I got canceled, especially when they leave it on a flipping cliffhanger that wasn't the freaking forbidding! Are you kidding me? That's a massive spoiler, but you know, it doesn't really matter since the show doesn't go on any further. I mean, it kind of ruined the end of the second season. Sorry. The forbidding, for those of you who don't know, is the prison where all of the demons were trapped after they were stopped by the Elcris, and the Elcris keeps them in the forbidding, and that, which is basically a hellscape. And so, yeah, I'm not going to say any more about that, but the concept of having an entire realm that is just a prison for the demons is so cool, and it's really cool. I love it. It reminds me of the demon prison from Fablehaven, where it's almost like a different dimension. They're just forced into this, basically a different world, and they're trapped there. So that was cool. Okay. I think I've said all I need to say. I will reiterate, the world was really cool. The show was really good quality. I loved the storyline and the plot in both the first and second seasons, and how different they were, and yet it still felt like one world. That was another thing. First and second season were actually really different, but they work together so well. It's like this, you could totally see it as the same world, and you totally see it with these same characters, and the story runs together so well, and yet so not. Oh, so that was a really, really well written, kind of written into each other with such different plots for the two seasons. And Mano Bennett is incredible. I love Mano Bennett. None of the main characters in either seasons were my favorite. I love the gnomes. I love Alanon. I love Bandon as a villain. And they appreciate their commitment to the gore. I love Ander. And friggin' Slanter. Slanter the gnomes. I love him so much. Anyway. Sorry. Yeah, overall, really good show. Really good quality. Highly recommend it. It's just a really good fantasy show. I really enjoyed it. I'm so sad that they canceled the show, because I wanted to see what happened with Will. Can't leave me on a cliffhanger like that. But oh well, I guess I will have to read the books to figure out what all happens with that. Anyway, drop your thoughts in the comments if you've read those books or watched the series or both. You can nerd out about that and how much you love it, hate it, whatever, in the comments. and I would gladly do that alongside you. If you haven't read / watched it, highly recommend the show. I haven't read the books yet, so I can't technically recommend those to you. Though, yeah. Any requests or recommendations, you can drop those in the comments as well. And yeah, I suppose I will see you all next time.